Hello, good evening and welcome to the Claw studio here at the Royal Opera House for this insight, which is supported by Rolex. I'm Ian Skelly and tonight we're going to go behind the scenes here for a fascinating insight into the work of two key individuals at the Opera House, without whom productions simply wouldn't get to the stage. Not only do they have to be absolutely across the production they're working on, and the technical demands of the performers on stage that they're working with, they also have to deploy a certain amount of honed diplomatic skills. Being very much pivotal in the rehearsal room, they're often caught in the middle of, shall we say, some delicate negotiations between choreographers and dancers and between conductors and singers. And on top of all of that, they have to be very fine and very quick-witted musicians, and we'll hear tonight that they certainly are. On the face of it, you'd think that they do the same job, but as we're going to discover this evening, it is the same job, but it's also very different. So to discuss their fascinating work here at the Opera House, would you please welcome the ballet pianist Kate Shipway and the opera repetiteur Susanna Stranders. Welcome to you both. Thank you very much indeed for doing this. Actually, it's your idea this evening, is it? How did it come about?
Yes, it is our idea, isn't it? We know each other in passing at the Opera House. All the pianists in the opera side and the ballet side sort of recognise each other. And we say hello, have a quick chat. But I think it was about a year ago, just under a year ago, we were both invited to accompany singers and dancers for the memorial at St Martin-in-the-Field of Lord Sainsbury, who was a big supporter of the Opera House, and his wife too. And so we were put in a dressing room together, pianists, let's put them in the dressing room together, so tiny little room with a little keyboard that we're trying to warm up on in a very cold church. And we were just chatting, weren't we, about what we do, and we thought, oh, this is quite interesting. I didn't realise you did that, blah, blah, blah. And we said, Susie suggested we should do this as an insight evening. Let's talk in front of an audience. So here we are.
I mean, the two worlds just don't meet. Is that the case?
No, it's strange. I mean, we're two companies working under the same roof, and yet the ballet and the opera just seem like, you know, it's almost like we could be in different buildings sometimes. Yeah. Which is strange, and I'm going to learn a lot from Kate tonight. I know there's so much that goes on that you know, we don't know about.
Yeah, so just take us through then what your jobs entail. I mean, starting with the opera, because of course you're also an assistant conductor, so you don't just play the piano, do you? So
I'm a member of what's called the music staff, and there are many duties as part of my role. Essentially, I am a rehearsal pianist. And so that means playing piano for rehearsals in the rehearsal studio. I would also occasionally play keyboard parts with the orchestra, maybe continuo in Mozart or Rossini operas, for instance. I might have to play for auditions. That can be up to 500 years worth of repertoire to have ready to go at any second. I might have to conduct offstage bands. I have to coach singers. And we also serve as assistant conductors, so making sure that the conductor who on the show is suitably supported.
So that's the morning taken care of. What about you, Kate? What's your role?
My day, again, I'm one of 7 full-time members of the Royal Ballet music staff. We have a similar day. We start generally at 10:30 in the morning, and we have to be able to play for a ballet class. So that is providing music for the dancers to do their warm-up exercises, combinations of exercises. This lasts for an hour and 15 minutes, and we have to provide entertainment sometimes. You've got to read the room very carefully. Dancers can be very tired. They are tired. Their bodies are tired, and they're carrying injuries. And so it's just reading the room, playing the right music. We have to be able to have lots of tunes at our fingertips, slow stuff, adage and pliés, and then light-hearted stuff. That can be any repertoire. You can play songs from the shows, you can play songs from opera, classical piano music, symphonies,
Is this all in your head, by the way, or have you got a great stack of stuff?
Well, I've been doing it a long time now, so
Yes.
lots of it's more meant to be in my head, yeah. And we have to be able to improvise a little bit as well. Because sometimes a teacher will say, I want 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and then you're off.
That's your
there's
cue.
no time. We were just talking, weren't we? And I just said sometimes you're playing, they might ask for a waltz and you have to give an introduction of what they call four counts, so which would be pa 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 pa. And during that time, you're thinking, I don't know what I'm going to play. I don't know what's coming out, but something happens. Your instinct and your experience and what have you.
Do you ever get requests from the dancers?
Yes, and I say no. No, I'm not that talented.
I suppose everything, though, leads eventually to working with the orchestra in some way, does it? I mean, is that where you're both aiming?
I think, for us, we also then continue and we play for rehearsals for the rest of the day. So we're playing scores, Nutcracker, all the traditional ballets, but also more modern ballets and a very diverse range of music. And that also I too can work with the orchestra in the evenings if there's a piano part, a celeste part. So we can go, those similarities, we do go all day. Again, we accompany auditions because sometimes singers come and work. There might be a ballet that's choreographed with voice or a cello, so we have to do auditions and be able to follow a conductor. And
It sounds to me, though, that you don't do as much improvising as the ballet will.
No, I suppose if we do any improvising, it would come through the continuo playing, finding the little quips and scales and things for the recitativi in Mozart operas. But even those can be quite simple, just chords as well. But no, essentially it's a very different approach altogether.
And just give us a pen sketch of your work as an assistant conductor. What on a granular level across the day might you be doing?
Yes, well, I was just assistant conductor on l'Elysée d'Amore, actually, which just closed a couple of days ago. And, well, for instance, the conductor was 4 days late to rehearsals. And so it would be expected that I would conduct the rehearsal room to begin with. The other thing that I adore, which is the assistant conductor's responsibility, is to prepare the covers and the understudies. I have to make sure that they're cooked and ready to go on at any second. And I really enjoy working with singers in that way as well. But essentially, I'm there to help the conductor, whether it's a guest conductor or Antonio Papan or whoever, help them do the best job that they can do with whatever that might be.
I have a little question. So if that conductor is ill, is that you?
Yeah.
Yeah.
How often does that happen?
Last year, my good colleague Richard Hetherington got the call on Peter Grimes. Well, since COVID, it's happened more.
Yes.
The rules are a bit less strict now, aren't they, about testing and so on. But at the beginning, if you tested positive, you couldn't come in. And so there was quite a lot of stand-ins, both on stage and in the pit. So it does happen. Not an awful lot, but it does happen.
Yeah. What about your journeys to doing this? Because I can't imagine that this was something you even knew existed, as it were, maybe when you were learning your instrument and maybe even when you were at music college. How did you end up, both of you, here? What's your story?
I think, well, for me, I grew up in Cornwall. I always wanted to, I knew from the age of 7, 8, I wanted to play the piano as a living. My grandma was a pianist, and there was always classical music in the house. One thing I always remember is that I used to love Young Musician of the Year. Every year, every round. And I remember one year somebody got to the final and they played the Tchaikovsky second piano concerto. And I had a copy of it, and I could have been about 11, 12, and I just opened it and I just remember playing the first chords. That's only ever as far as I've got. I've never got any further. But that just inspired me. And even then I thought, I want to play for a living. I had this very romantic idea of being a concert pianist. And then I went to music college and realized, yes, a lot of people there are a lot of pianists out there. And I graduated from music college not really knowing what I was going to do. I became a freelancer and accompanied. I gave recitals. I taught recorders in primary schools.
So at no stage in this, this
No,
process
I
you
didn't
were
know
interested.
about ballet.
Were you interested in ballet?
No,
Ah.
no, I never went to ballet lessons. It was never something that was on my radar as a child. We were all sort of on the beach and boats and sailing and piano. That was my life. And it was when I'd graduated from music college, and the Royal Ballet School host around the country Saturday morning classes for junior associates, young children, and with a view that eventually they might be a feeder into the Royal Ballet School at White Lodge and so on. And I played for those classes one Saturday morning, and somebody showed me a video of the Royal Ballet School. Of course, I didn't know a vocational ballet school existed. I saw it, and I saw the film of their final performance, annual performance. And it was on the Royal Opera House stage, and the dancers were on the stage, and they were performing elite syncopations. And at the back of the stage, there's a band. And there was a pianist on that stage, Philip Gammon, who's a previous colleague. And I thought, what's that? Oh, hold on, what's that about? And I found out more about the school and auditioned and got a job as a trainee ballet pianist.
And Susie, you came in on the Young Artists programme, I think,
Yes.
into the Royal Opera House.
Yes.
How did that happen?
Well,
and was that something that you desperately wanted?
When I was thinking about my journey, it's interesting. I started off as a violinist, an oboist, and a percussionist. And I don't remember working with singers at all until I went to the Guildhall School of Music and Drama as a postgraduate, actually. And there was something about working with text and words that just lit a fire in me. And then one day, I was at Guildhall playing what was called a Wednesday afternoon platform, and a singer had asked me to play Una voce poco fa from Barbara Seville. And I got a little report in my pigeonhole afterwards saying, Susie, there's a really good sense of drama in your playing. Have you thought about training to become a repetiteur? And I decided that I would give it a go. So I auditioned for the repetiteurs course at Guildhall, did that. And then I won a scholarship to America. And I did 3 years in the States, in Cincinnati, San Francisco, and Houston Grand Opera. Did a lot of young artist programs, but my dream was to come here. And I was very, very lucky that when the audition time came round, I was accepted. And I have to say, that was 2004. And I've been mentored by Tony Papano pretty much ever since the first day I started. I mean, it's been amazing. Ups and downs, of course, but never really looked back, to be honest.
Yeah. I imagine when you come in, though, and you think you can both play the piano, and so, OK, we're sorted. But then you arrive here, and you suddenly learn there's a great deal more to learn. I mean, for example, at music college, you can't really learn to work with ballet dancers because there are no dancers.
There are no dancers there.
So how do you learn all this?
They're very different art forms. So I was lucky that I got a job with the Royal Ballet School, and they took me on as a trainee ballet pianist, which was very difficult. I mean, I had a slight knowledge of playing for ballet, but it's about, as a pianist coming into the ballet world, you have to learn their art form, not physically, of course, but you need to understand the knowledge, the words, what they're doing.
Yeah. The grammar, I suppose, of it.
Yes. And that takes time. And dancers speak musically in a very different way. They will talk in counts. Let's have 4 counts in. And a count is a pulse rather than a musical crotchet or quaver or semi-brief. And so that took a lot of learning to improvise and what type of quality of music was required for each of the steps for the ballet class. So basically, I think every pianist I know that plays for ballet has learnt on the job. And it's a tough learning curve because, you know,
it's a different language entirely.
Yes, I mean, I was working with 16-year-olds, 16 to 18-year-olds, but you couldn't come into a company like ours and sit at the piano and just play. You know, you'll be eaten alive. But it's, even now, I don't consider myself a great improviser, but I can do it to facilitate my job. But I'm always, I'm I'm still out of my comfort zone playing for ballet class, even though I do enjoy it.
And do singers have a different language to pianists, would you say? I mean, is it the same problem for you?
Absolutely, and I do a lot of coaching of all ages and stages of singers, and I think finding that vivid imagination for colour and sound is really important. It's so much more to me than just about being sharp or flat or behind or ahead. There's so many other ways to work with singers. Often say out of text comes rhythm, because all quavers are equal, but some are more equal than others when you have text. And I'm fascinated by exploring things like that with singers. But one thing I think I really want to share, which I think is quite different about our work, is I don't actually often think of myself as a pianist in a sense. I see myself very much as an orchestra with 10 fingers.
Oh yes, well that's part of playing these scores.
Most of my life is spent, 95% of my life is spent playing reductions, orchestral reductions on the piano. I know you do that as well, but you also play stuff that's written for the piano. And I would say that's quite a big difference in our day jobs.
Yes.
Yeah.
I want to come back to that bit about reductions a little later, but of course, with dancers, you've got to really also think about the stresses on their body, even when, for example, you're jumping presumably from classical rep to contemporary stuff. Is that because within a ballet, a production, you can be doing that on the night?
Yes,
can't you?
Particularly when we have a triple bill, three different ballets in one evening. That needs to be an eclectic mix of work generally. And so there will be, for the dancers, you might start with a very pure classical ballet into some Balanchine, some Ashton into some Balanchine, into some Wayne McGregor, they do amazing things with their body. But I know dancers find it very difficult. What they don't like to do is to do, for instance, quite a contemporary work first, to then have an interval of 25 minutes and then be purely classical.
Right.
That's a very tricky way to work the body.
Why?
I think just because of the classicism is so trained and so pure and exact what they're doing, and then suddenly the body is thrown to extreme, and to then sort of rein yourself back in, which I understand as well. You sort of want the classical stuff first, I think. But then, we were talking about this the other day. When you go to probably a symphonic concert, generally the new contemporary piece, a new commission, is always first, isn't it?
Or in the middle.
Or in
Yes.
Yeah. So
a difficult sandwich.
yes. But it's tricky to then rein yourself back into being very classical.
Yes. Can I steer into the sort of the thorny areas now of the relationships you have in the rehearsal rooms? Because here you are, and I suppose we all imagine in a rehearsal room that the pianist is sitting in the corner, and there's the director, there are the singers, or the dancers, there's the choreographer, conductors. Presumably you have to have a relationship with all of those individuals, and I just wonder where you sit in that process. I mean, it's a very different process for the both of you. For example, in opera, at what point do you hand it all on, for example?
You mean to the orchestra?
And indeed to the conductor.
Well, no, I mean, the conductor ideally will be with us crafting and shaping it from day one.
Right.
And those conductors that are genuinely interested in the creative process will be there every step of the way, making micro changes to the ways they, negotiate gear changes of tempo, or, offering little suggestions to the singers. And I would say, I'd be lying if I said all those relationships are easy. They're not. It's like any relationship in life. It's chemistry. Sometimes you absolutely get on like a house on fire with the conductor, and it's so enabling. I mean, Rusalka last year with Semyon Bychkov, for me, was one of the biggest joys of my career. I felt so enabled every note that he showed me. And, it's a joy, but there are other times when you have to find, it can feel a bit awkward, and you have to, whether it's on a personality level or musically you don't quite click or whatever.
So you're trying to interpret what the conductor will eventually be trying to get out of the orchestra.
Absolutely. And ideally, I want to represent the orchestra as closely in articulation and sound and all of that as possible to the orchestra, that when the orchestra then takes over, once we get closer to opening night, the singers are not in any way sort of jolted by the change of sound.
That transition always needs to be smooth. It's the same with us. When you're playing, at the moment we're working on the ballet The Cellist, and I'm in the rehearsal room, I'm playing a cello part and the orchestral part, and you can't always put everything in. And percussion sounds, but my job is that transition sound-wise between the rehearsal room, the stage and piano rehearsal, and then handing on to the stage and orchestral rehearsal is as smooth as possible. If the dancers are saying, I can hear everything, then great, I've done my job well.
But in your case, when does the conductor arrive?
The conductor doesn't necessarily arrive early. I was wondering about this actually, because am I right in saying for you, and when a production starts, there is the opera director, but that takes the rehearsals alongside the conductor who takes the rehearsals.
Yes.
Now in our world, the conductor, even if he's there from day one, does not take those rehearsals. So if it's a new work, the choreographer is taking the rehearsals and choreographing as we go along. And if it's something like Swan Lake, then the ballet repetiteurs, which is not us, we can talk about that in a moment, they teach the ballets and then coach them and rehearse the ballets. And then the conductor will come in, but he still won't take the rehearsal. We'll have a full run or a full section. He will conduct me at the piano, but if they need to stop, it won't generally stop.
So when you're in the rehearsals before the conductor arrives, how do you know what the conductor kind of wants?
Well, you don't, but you have to take that responsibility.
Really?
You hope your own musical instinct is what the conductor will want. With dance, there's always, the tempi are always, for principal dancers, are always going to be slightly different, but you need to be within a ballpark. But if this is perfect for whoever, if you're a little bit slower, a little bit faster, either way, that's why we have live music in the room, so dancers are so adaptable to slightly different tempi, which is always going to happen. It's always live performances. But there are times there have been times that we've had a choreographer that has come in and said, this is the music I'm using. And you can listen to so many recordings of music now. Spotify is there. You can listen to 20 recordings of whatever piece of music you're going to use, and they will all be very different. And somebody might choose the slowest tempo, and then the conductor might arrive and say, I'm not keen on conducting. It can never be played at this speed.
Does that
and
cause
then
tensions
someone
between...
can say, but yes, they can. And that's then the conversation that the choreographer and the conductor has to have. But sometimes the three of us have spoken beforehand, and even if the conductor isn't there from day one, which he won't be, because you can sit and it might take 2 hours to choreograph 10 minutes worth of music if you've got 10 dancers. So it's a very slow process, and so the conductor wouldn't sit there at that point.
That's quite extraordinary.
But,
and then, of course, you stay with the production, don't you?
Yes. So with the way we work is, so 7 pianists, we all need to know the traditional repertoire. When it's a triple bill, two pianists will be put on a short ballet, and you are pianist number 1, pianist number 2. The first pianist is responsible for all the full runs, whether that's Nutcracker, Alice in Wonderland.
And you mentioned that ballet pianists come into opera. I just wonder, once you've done this for a long time, if you've only worked in opera and you've only worked in ballet, does that art form inform your playing as a pianist, would you say? And if it does, how does it inform it?
You mean playing opera all day?
Yeah.
And then going to stuff written for the piano?
Yeah.
Well, for me, I just think my imagination is all about orchestral colour and orchestral texture. So even if I'm playing a Schubert song, which is, you know, I can hear cellos and things.
I think you have to. Even any piece of music that's written, if it's purely for the piano, you're thinking about instruments, and that's how you manage to produce different colours and different sounds in your playing. I think we're both lucky that because we work with an orchestra, we're immersed in that. We're sitting amongst people, other musicians, and you're immersed in the sound. Today we had an orchestral rehearsal of the cellist, what we call an orchestral alone, and I'm sat in the pit, and I would never ever be in this situation. There is a piano part with the orchestra, but at one point our wonderful cellist Hetty Snell plays the first movement of the Elgar cello concerto, and I'm sat here with the orchestra around me, and it's incredible. I mean, the feeling, the sound, and you're immersed in it, and you'd never normally be that close. A pianist wouldn't be sat amongst the orchestra at the festival hall.
The same experience
wow.
on Salome, the Strauss. I was playing Celeste, which is a fantastic part. Celeste is like a sort of keyed glockenspiel. And I had the harp to one side and French horns over here and the strings. And it
blows you away. Yeah.
It's wonderful. One other thing I want to just say about your question about sort of coming back to the piano music, I think because our role on the music staff requires so much versatility. You know, you think like a conductor, you're inside the words that are being sung, you're playing like the orchestra, and you're bringing all of these different things to your music making. I mean, you never play a chord unless you can feel a pulse or the right sense of dramatic impulse. And those are things that I notice in non-opera pianists. Sometimes they don't breathe into their playing. And also they play very up and down, up and down. Not everyone, whereas I'm often thinking sweeps of sound, you know, because the bows go like this, and there's air through the woodwind. And so physically, it's just a very different experience than just black and white notes and hammers.
Yeah, I imagine when you're playing Mozart, that must be absolutely front and centre in your imagination, because you can hear the opera in every piece of piano music he ever wrote. Although, as you say, there are plenty of pianists who sort of don't bring that voice out.
Yeah. Oh, there's so much humanity in his music as well. Yeah.
But I think that also goes back to knowing how to do that by having sat with the orchestra and hearing the orchestra breathe. Sometimes we have dancers that might say, oh, it's a little bit quick, and then you play. You just have to play as the orchestra and give the space and the breath that the orchestra have, that it's not the piano is such a percussive instrument that you have to learn how to play it as an orchestra, and you know that's what we both have to do on a daily basis.
And you mentioned the piano reductions. Some composers actually have produced their own reductions. Stravinsky, I think, did for some of his ballets, but not everybody does. And then you get into the realms, I imagine, of terrible reductions as well. I mean, how bad can they get?
Well, funnily enough, I mean, actually, during the lockdown, I decided I must write a book about all of this because there's so much to share about it. I mean, right here, I've got the full score of Rigoletto, which is the score I'm currently working on. A full score means literally got all the orchestra parts, and I will sit at my kitchen table with this and the vocal score comparing. I'll be adding things, I'll be getting rid of things, I'll be writing in articulations. I find often in Italian opera, sustained instruments are missing. So you might have something very light in the strings, but then there's a French horn playing wah underneath it. And someone's decided in the reduction they don't need to put the French horn in.
Because it's not important.
But the difference for a singer, I believe, if you find exactly the right texture and right sound, they will sing better. And conductors will feel as well that they're also more supported. So it's a real headache, and I say to my students, you know, the kitchen table work, unfortunately, is one of those hurdles we all have to cross. But Hansel and Gretel, I was going to say, it's what I'm doing, my Christmas show, and I'm preparing it at the moment. And the reduction is absolute headache. It's taking me ages to unpick it and improve it.
Right. So you actually work on the reduction and create your own effect.
Yeah, I find, I mean, Kate, I don't know how you feel about your scores, but my vocal scores become so personal to me because I make it my own. And what's lovely about the reductions is that my other repetiteur colleagues might make different choices. for what they believe is the overriding quality of sound or texture that they're after. And so it becomes a very personal thing. But there was a time when I was in Salzburg, actually, working on Romeo and Juliet. And after the break, I came back to the piano and my score had gone. And someone said, "Don't worry, I've got a score." And I said, "You have no idea. That's like a different piece to me. I need to find my score." And I think actually the organist had taken it to look at something. But I feel quite at 6s and 7s if I don't have my particular annotations close to hand.
Yes. And Susie, I imagine that in ballet that there isn't often a reduction because they're working often with new music and new ideas, edits of things.
So the historical ballets have all got piano reductions that you work out how you're going to play them. You know, I think every pianist will, as you say, every pianist will play it their way.
Yeah.
Everyone thinks this is important, that's important. But when we have a newly commissioned score, which we seem to, like once a year, the last few years, we've had sort of a 3-act ballet. And that's very difficult to learn. Because we've worked very closely with Joby Talbot over the last few years, and his rhythms, they take a lot of that. That's what you say your kitchen table work. That's what you spend endless time trying to fathom out. And if you've got something like Sleeping Beauty, you know you can go to a recording and you can listen very quickly. You can learn very quickly because there's a tool to listen to. But with his stuff, it's a blank canvas. You have a score and you're just trying to doing maths, actually, for a lot of the time. And then a choreographer will want to hear what you're doing before we get into the rehearsal room. I think what's important is for both of us is that, well, for dancers and probably some singers as well, is that when we start rehearsals, they are being taught it. We have to have done the homework, done the preparation already. We need to be able to go, ta-da, we're ready. We can play at whatever speed you want us to play it, but it's prepared and good to go. And so a lot of work goes in behind the scenes to get that to where it needs to be.
And you also, of course, play on stage from time to time, don't you? You're actually playing piano pieces.
Yes, sometimes we get to, there might be certain ballets that are choreographed that's on stage piano, or we have a lot, quite in the rep, there are piano concertos choreographed, so one of us would be chosen to do that. So that's.
So then you become a soloist.
Yes, that's the other. That's the evening job. Yes, that's fantastic. I mean, I've had the privilege to play some wonderful things and cover some wonderful things as well. But that's very nice. I always think it's nice that when you've been in the rehearsal studio, you see the process fully through, and you're then involved in performances as well, and that's very special.
Yes.
But then you have to up your game again because
Yeah.
you're going on to sort of you're performing, in front of a lot of people at the Royal Opera House, Covent Garden.
I think I would say actually, I mean, hearing you speak, Kate, about all of this, it should be said that you can, well, in case it's not clear, the preparation that goes into our work is never ending. It's not like a Friday night, you turn off your computer and you've got the weekend. It's never, ever like that. There's always, especially in a repertoire house like this, there's always the next score to learn, and you're trying all the time to keep your head above water. And that little monkey on your shoulder saying, you've got to study, that never goes away. And I've got 2 little girls at home. That balance is hard to find.
It's hard to, you have to work out where to use your time, don't you? And what the priorities are and when to start preparing the next thing, knowing, right, well, we're nearly finished with this, but I've got to start on that and that and that and that and that. And there's always things looming. And I always remember years ago, something I was learning, and it was about 3 o'clock in the morning, and I had the tunes
Earworm.
going round in my head all night, and I thought, I can't get to the next section. There was whole section, and you repeated, and I couldn't work out the transition into the next thing. So I thought, well, the only thing to do is get up and sort it. So up I was, down to the piano in the middle of the night.
Waking the neighbours up.
Oh, of course, yes, it goes like that. And then you could go back to bed and...
Well, we're going to hear you both play some music in just a moment, but I just wanted to talk about, very briefly, one other aspect of this, which is when you're on tour. You go on tour with operas as a conductor, I presume, do you?
We're going in June and July to Japan.
Yeah.
We go as the music staff. There's 3 members of music staff going.
Yes. And you've, I think, just been to Japan, haven't you?
Yes, we have. The Royal Ballet have generally, historically, we tour every summer.
And the challenge there is that you're working with often a different orchestra.
Yes, we don't, the Royal Ballet don't tour the orchestra, but when the opera go away, you do take the orchestra with you, don't you? We pick up local orchestras there.
Is that a challenge?
Yes, it can be, because quite often that orchestra will not have played for ballet before. And so there's a lot of pulling, pushing, and the way the speeds are and the tempi. So
is that a role you have to sort of be the
I
be
don't
the bridge?
have to. No. That's very much the conductor. Goes ahead generally and has a lot of rehearsals with the orchestra. But in Japan in the summer, I played a piano concerto, an arrangement of Chopin, the ballet A Month in the Country, and so that's 45 minutes accompanied by the orchestra, and that was, I'm so used to playing it with the orchestra here that it just naturally flows, and so there were some corners that you really had to be on high alert. But interestingly, actually we have 4 performances out there and something else to deal with apart from the heat that we had in Japan and the climate and everything. We were in the middle of the last show in a place called Himeji, and a gala performance, A Month in the Country, was on first, and halfway, 20 minutes in, sirens went off in the theatre. The whole thing ground to a halt, and we didn't know what had happened, and people were worried that we were very close to the coast, that we didn't know whether it could have been a tsunami or what had happened, and it turned out that there was a fire somewhere in one of the dressing rooms backstage, not our dressing rooms, but so the whole performance ground to a halt for 20 minutes. The curtain came in, we just sat there waiting, and you're thinking, well, where are we going to go from the beginning again? But it's staying calm, and I don't speak Japanese, so it's like I don't have anyone to talk to find out what's actually going on.
I was recently talking to a ballet conductor whose name will remain anonymous, and indeed the company he works for will not be mentioned, but they were on a tour, and no matter what he did in Nutcracker, the orchestra he was working with took it so slowly he thought it was for tortoises, and he just couldn't get this orchestra to go any faster. The poor dancers were just hanging around on stage. It must be very difficult. Well, listen, let's have a listen to some of your playing, and Kate, we're going to hear from you first. Actually, before we hear what you play, we're going to hear what you're going to play. Just explain what we're going to hear.
Yes, I am. Well, in my capacity of getting the chance to play some solo work, in February we have Kevin O'Hare has arranged a programme, the Festival of New Choreographers, and there are 5 choreographers coming from all over the world, and I am going to be playing along with my, I was going to say colleague, which he is, Robert Clark, head of music. He's also my partner as well. We are going to be playing a double piano concerto by a Dutch composer called Joey Rookins. And it's a fantastic piece. Gemma Bond is the choreographer. She used to be a dancer here, went to America, and now she's coming back to choreograph. It's probably the hardest piece I will have learned. It's nothing, I haven't played anything like it before. It's so rhythmical. It sort of hits you in the face. It's big brass, big percussion. And I was reading about, it's called In Unison. And the composer, he said he's always hearing double piano concertos that is sort of 2 soloists playing together but separately. But he wanted the 2 pianists to be exactly in unison. And so it's a bit of a challenge. It's not ready, nowhere near ready for anyone to hear it in public. But we do have a little recording of it, I think, don't we?
Yes. This isn't you.
This isn't me.
No,
this is not me or us.
Let's have a listen to this challenge.
Wow.
Good luck with that one.
So thank you.
Where are you in the rehearsal at this?
It hasn't started rehearsal yet.
Have you started learning it?
I'm on page 5. It's one of those, everything is da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da, and if you can't count, the time signature is changing every bar, and it's something you have to practice very slowly with a metronome, da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da, and get the pattern, repeat, 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 get it into your fingers, because this goes on for slightly different variations, but it goes on for 20 minutes.
And there are dancers dancing.
There will be dancers dancing.
They've got to dance to that.
They will be dancing to that. But
Wow.
it's one of those pieces that you've just got to get, it's got to go into your muscle memory. Because you need to see patterns, you need to see the phrasing, and you need to learn it in chunks. So that's the beginning of the evening.
Yes, and then it moves on to something which apparently sounds to me to be simpler, but I suspect
Yes.
it's Mozart, it's not going to be quite so simple. Is it?
So that's going to be the first number of the evening, and then the last number of the evening is some Mozart solo piano, which I've been asked to play, and it's for the choreographer Jessica Lang from New York, and it is Mozart's 12 variations on Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star. So it's going from one extreme to the other. And it's what we were talking about earlier, actually, that you're going from the sort of really contemporary work, busy, your brain trying not to go ahead of your fingers, and then having probably an hour to calm yourself down. And then apparently, I don't know whether, but it might be, the piano might be on stage somewhere on high up.
Right.
Yes,
No
so
pressure.
no, nothing to worry about. But we'll see if that actually happens. But
Well, curiously, we have a piano on stage here.
yes, you do.
And we'd love to hear you
I'm
play a
going
little
to
bit.
play a little bit of Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star, which, yes, we'll
Okay,
see.
Kate, thank you very much. They are very beautiful variations, if you don't know. They're not as simple as they sound, but here we go. Kate, thank you very much indeed. Susie, I do envy both of you, but you in particular, because I love singing an opera, that you're in rehearsals with singers, and there must be moments when suddenly you witness that flash of something that wasn't expected, an exciting moment, or perhaps you just spot a star of the future.
Absolutely.
As a singer. I mean, does that happen a lot here?
No, every now and then you find, you know, when I say to people that I work as part of the rehearsal process, and I think it's easy to presume that that can be not quite as exciting as the performance, but actually I think some of the gritty work gets done in the rehearsal room, and the singer's really taking risks sometimes, trying stuff out. It's very exciting when it happens. Singers can, what we call mark quite a lot, which is when they don't sing out a lot. Which can happen quite a lot, and then you might do a run of a scene, and then it's all bells and whistles, and it's very, very exciting.
Yes, yes.
But also conductors can suddenly just show you something they haven't shown you for 2 weeks, and you're,
Actually, that's briefly reminded me of something, because I did do some opera collaboration a few years ago, and that was Les Enfants Terribles for 3 pianos, I think 4 singers, and it was choreographed, and for each singing role there was a dancer. And we did it at the Barbican. And when we were in rehearsals, of course, the dancers constantly had to do everything, what we could say, full out. Every day, full out, because the choreographer needed to see the movement and what have you. And the singers would say, oh, I'm just marking today. And everyone was like, no, and that was the 2 differences. And we thought the dancers weren't able to do that, and singers, need to do that to protect the voice.
And I'm not a trained singer, but I would be expected to sing in a role if there was a singer that was without a voice for a certain. It would be the repetiteur that would, it doesn't have to be beautiful, but the room needs the cues and the text.
And if they're marking, does that affect the balance and what you're doing at the piano?
Yeah, it's something another thing that I'm passionate about is good marking. It's going in the book. Good marking is something actually that's really difficult to do, because it still needs the right intention, and needs the right energy, and the right sort of drama behind it. And some singers think that they can sort of undercook it, and actually that doesn't help anyone. So it's possible to hardly use any voice, but still give lots of everything else. But I think it's a learnt skill.
Yes. Well, let's hear you playing something next. And I think you've chosen something that really demonstrates this point you were making earlier, which is that you're not playing the piano, you're playing an orchestra with your 10 fingers. Is that the case?
Yeah, I'm actually going to play 3 things, if that's okay. A little bit of the opening of Rigoletto, to show, some orchestral textures, and how the drama and the music just live together right from the first chord. I'm going to play just a tiny bit of Mozart, just in sort of comparison to Kate, about something from The Marriage of Figaro, just to show very different sort of Mozartian texture. And then, if you would indulge me, I'd like to finish with Vici d'arte from Tosca. Because if I'm being hand on heart honest, it was Puccini that was the composer that really set me on the opera path.
Why?
I just hear so much heart in the melodies, and it just, I don't know, when I was a teenager, I remember listening to Chi bel sogno. Do you remember those music magazines that used to get a cassette with them?
Yes, the great composers.
Yes. Great. And I remember listening to a Puccini cassette and thinking, wow, this is wonderful. So,
your piano awaits. Thank you very much, Susie.
So the prelude to Rigoletto starts with a brassy fanfare. And we know straight away that this opera's not going to end well, because we have the curse music, which sets up the whole scene. When you're playing trumpet and trombone, I often think I want to use the pads of my fingers quite a lot to really get that sort of warmth of sound. Even it's quite piano here. So I'll just show you the sort of thing I mean. So. And then the timpani. And then the trumpet again. Really brassy. Back to trumpet and trombone. only now do the strings enter with a tremolo in the lower. It keeps building. Really brassy. Tutti, everyone. Just the violins playing the tune. Back to pianissimo trumpet. Now the trombones. Timp. Timpani, crescendo, plus woodwinds, tutti. And then we're into the bit. And then just to give a glimpse of really, it's just literally 5 or 6 bars of Susanna's aria, which comes at Act 4 of Figaro. So now the strings are playing pizzicato. So I've got to give the sense, they're plucking the strings. So I've got to give the sense of something that resembles that. And then I've got the oboe. And I really have to think about what's the sound of the oboe, what goes into playing the instrument, you know, that double reed, lots of breath, and I have to try and put that all together. And then the flute comes in as well, about 3 bars in. So oboe and pizzicato. Then the flute on this. Gioia bella. And that's when I might, if the soprano was ill or something, I might have to sing in a little bit. So you can see 2 scores, 2 very, very different textures, 2 very different approaches to representing the orchestra. And that's what I get a real kick out of, is finding the right paintbrush to work with from day to day, depending on what I'm doing. And now, just to finish, is my interpretation of Vici d'arte, and hopefully using this beautiful Yamaha grand piano to sing like the best sopranos in the world might.
Who needs singers? That was absolutely beautiful. Kate and Susie, you've painted a very exciting picture of your lives. And you know, you've described your days, which sound to me as if they last for at least 12 or hours or longer sometimes. We're waking up at 3 o'clock in the morning with the tunes going round in our heads. You don't get weekends. This sounds to me like a pretty stressful life, actually, because you're on the edge all of the time. How do you kind of navigate that and possibly avoid the burnout? Because this is a recipe for burnout, it sounds to me.
You want to go first?
It's very difficult because I think we all strive for perfection in this industry, in the music, in the arts, and it is tough, and sometimes it's hard to keep up with the amount of stuff that we have to learn. You can only do as good as much as you can, and I think as long as you know you've put your heart into it and the time that you have to do things, you know you've done the best job you can. You're constantly chasing your tail. You can always do things better. You can always find new ways of exploring how to play things.
But there must be days when you come in, say, for example, with the classes at the beginning, where you're required to improvise on the spot, and you're so exhausted, the mechanism just doesn't work.
Yes, I mean, there are days like that, but you're there to facilitate. You know, I'm very aware that I'm there for the dancers, so you've got to sort of snap out of that and, smile and get on with it, because it is, I'm not going to say it, it's not an easy job. It's not, and I think people, we've said before, people say, oh, it's so wonderful. You play the piano. Yeah. You must, it's wonderful doing something that you love, isn't it? Yeah. And it is, don't get me wrong. But there are times that it's up and down. And
I think for me, even though I'm under the same roof all the time, and you'd think that you would just settle in a workplace, but we have, every new production feels like the first day at school each time. Guest conductors, singers coming in. And I'll speak for myself, I still get the jitters on the first day. And I think for the repetiteur, more than anything, there's a sense that you know the piece better than anyone on the first day. I probably put too much pressure on myself sometimes to deliver at such a high level. It feels a bit like stepping onto centre court at Wimbledon, day in, day out, and it's a big privilege. But you have to work really hard to stay there.
And you have to. We all get nervous still. I mean, everyone. I think people also think that it can be nervous in the studio. I'm not talking about necessarily performing. That's another element of nerves. But we all get nervous, and it doesn't go away. And I think you need the nerves, you need some slight anxiety at times, because you care. You have to care. And it's then how you deal, your nerves and the way you deal with things changes with age. It doesn't get any easier, but it's the way you handle it yourself and manage yourself and the tools you use. I always laugh because people will say, we've been playing the piano all day, and you get home at whatever time, and people will say to you, oh, what do you play when you get home? What do you play for pleasure when you get home?
For me, it's hickory dickory dock.
Yes. But and I think, or what classical music do you listen to when you get home? And we all love classical music, but there's a time our ears are tired when you're, from a rehearsal room, from listening to whatever you're doing, but from listening to how you play, the sound you want to create from the piano, you're constantly on high alert. Your ears are the major tool in what we do, as well as the fingers, of course. But yes, it's great. It is great.
Well, we have quite a few students in the audience tonight, and I wonder, you might well have inspired one or two of them to pursue a career like this. You never know.
I hope so.
You might be talking to your competitors. But if there was any advice you would give a student who maybe is watching this and thinking, well, that's an interesting route. I mean, how would you go about this now? What would your single piece of advice be?
Well, I would say as a repetiteur for opera, it's the best musical training you could ever dream of. It's so multifaceted that it requires such a lot of you in different ways. I would just say my big advice would be study, study, study. Just take every opportunity you can to learn from people. Go and watch singing lessons happening, take notes, go and watch conductors working, go and sit in rehearsals, go to the symphony. Just immerse yourself in what it is to be a musician.
Yes.
Yeah.
There is one thing we mentioned earlier, actually, a slight aside, that a lot of pianists at music college, because it can be a lonely life being a pianist if you're slowly just wanting to play for yourself, or you might accompany singers or instrumentalists, but you may never have worked with a conductor or be able to follow a conductor. Oh. And it's tricky, isn't it? It's not just 1, 2, 3, 4, and you play along. You know, they are expressive. And we have people that come and audition for us, and part of their audition was prepare something from the ballet repertoire that we've sent them, and the conductor, with our music director, will stand up and conduct them through that. And it's very interesting to see who can and who can't. So I would say immerse yourself in everything musical, and absorb everything. Go to concerts, see how people work. If you get opportunities, take every opportunity that comes your way, and come and visit us, because we're very open to letting you absorb what we do and see what we do, and nurturing you.
Well, at this stage, we were going to draw things to a close, but the other day I managed to persuade these two ladies to commit a first at the Royal Opera House. We are now going to hear a ballet pianist and an opera repetiteur playing together, a duet. They said yes. I didn't think they would. So I'm very excited to hear this myself. This really is a first here at the Royal Opera House. So what are we going to hear?
This is the Berceuse from Fauré's Dolly Suite.
Okay. Orchestrally interpreted, I hope.
Well,
Of course.
see if you can hear what instruments I'm thinking of.
Yeah.
Right, okay. Well, take it away. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Shall I?
Right. I pedal and you turn the pages.
Okay. Right. Here we go.
Okey dokey.
Yes.
Well, thank you both. Thank you both very much indeed for that wonderful treat. Isn't it how wonderful how music can bring worlds together to create such beauty and harmony? Lovely way to end our insight this evening. I must thank Susanna Stranders and Kate Shipway for some wonderful insights into what I thought was a pretty obvious world, but it clearly is a very complicated and demanding occupation. Thank you for being here if you're here in the Claws studio. Thank you for watching wherever you are in the world. And it just remains for me to say thank you for joining us for this insight, which is supported by Rolex. From all of us here at the Claws studio, good night.